ionet and Openledger Roundtable AMA. My name is Milan. I will be your host today. I'm also the VP of Marketing at ionet. Super thrilled to be here. It's going to be a fantastic AMA. There's a lot to unpack here. And so, we're just going to kick it off with a brief round of introductions. Today, we have IONation on the call, but we also have a lot of people from Openledger, right? And with that being said, Gaurav, do you just want to introduce what ionet is for those people in the audience who are from Openledger who may not be 100% familiar with us? We can just give them a couple of sentences on what ionet is.
Hi guys, we're basically we started our journey as a DePIN, and in the first 6 months of our we can say birth, we became one of the biggest DePIN in the market for the GPUs, and then now we basically have started our journey to become end-to-end AI player, which is creating a whole ecosystem around not just giving the GPUs in currently, but now we give the platform to build models, serve models, basically the whole ecosystem around the AI play. That's where we're headed. So we started with the DePIN, and now we are creating a platform where people can do anything or everything to do with AI going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Gaurav. And Ram, over to you. For those of the audience who may not be 100% familiar in terms of what Openledger is doing, do you want to give a few sentences on what you guys are all about?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here, and I'm glad to be among you guys. And good to meet you again, Gaurav. So OpenLedger is a data blockchain for AI. We provide decentralized trust infrastructure for specialized models to be built on top of us. And the three major stakeholders in our platform. One is data nets, where people contribute unique data sets. Think of these to be domain-specific data sets, and then these data sets are trained to build specialized models on top of us. Basically, they fine tune models with these data sets. And then these models are then inferred by agents or apps or any kind of AI services that would need inference of models. So that's what OpenLedger is. We are building this platform which orchestrates all of this together.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ram. And for those who are unfamiliar, Ram, what is your role at Openledger?
I'm one of the core contributors of OpenLedger. I've been in the industry from 2017, majorly in building a blockchain R&D firm. We've worked with pretty much some of the major blockchains like Polygon, Hedera, Hashgraph, Aptos, and many more. We've also spent a good amount of time working with a lot of Web2 projects, bringing them to Web3. Some of them are like Viacom, um, Walmart's India subsidiary, Flipkart, and many more as well. So that's sort of like our background. OpenLedger is something that we've been working on for the last a year or so. We've raised about 8 million. Polychain led the round, and we have Borderless Capital and some more interesting investors who are part of our cap table, and we're excited about what we're building.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Ram. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Gaurav and Tausif, Gaurav is our Chief Technology Officer, doing all of the cool tech things that you guys are seeing, and Tausif heads up all of our BD and partnerships. So I know you guys see a tremendous amount of partnerships that we're hosting on our X account and so much more, and that is all thanks to Tausif. So just by way of introduction, that is the IO team and that is the Openledger team. Now, before we begin, it is worth me mentioning one thing, which is super important for our community members. So, for those of you who are perhaps a little bit new to either ionet or Openledger, there is a prize to be won from this particular AMA. All you need to do is take a screenshot of you being in the AMA and post it in the Openledger community and Discord channel. I'm sure there's a lot of community moderators and astronauts from the IO team with the links, but there are prizes to be won there. So if you are listening in, why not win something in the process as well, right? So just to by way of just as an FYI, there are some cool prizes there. But thank you all for joining us today. We have over 100 people listening in, and that number is going to keep on increasing. Now, with that being said, guys, we're going to go into our very first question. So, guys, this question is about really about envisioning the future of LLMs and SLMs. And what the community has been asking is really about explaining how individual companies, whether it's ionet, whether it's Openledger, how they're viewing the future of LLMs. When, for those of you who don't know, LLMs are basically large language models, and SLMs, which are small language models, right? And where we really see these technologies heading. So over to you, Ram. I'm going to kick it off by just presenting this question to you first. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as you had rightly put, right, most of the models today are larger language models. Any AI apps, ChatGPT runs OpenAI's model, and Meta has its own AI interfaces, which basically use Llama as a model, and there are a few others as well, as you know, in the market. And there are a couple more, open source, truly open source models as well, which are majorly like large language models. And I would consider like large language model as your basic general knowledge of the world, right? It has pretty much all of the internet scrape data, and some more generalized data, which gives us understanding of English and knowledge, and basic understanding of how humans interact, right? But how like smaller or specialized language models are different from that is that if AI is going to be a general purpose technology, which we all believe in, and AI is going to become like electricity, right? It's going to be used everywhere and every other domain. You would need models that are specialized for each domain, right? You would need like domain specific models. And domain specific models, I believe, would work in hand with large language models. They would coexist together, and we would see apps tomorrow or even today where they would use large language model to get a context of what's happening and what's the question about, and a domain specific smaller specialized model to actually accurately predict the answer and provide it to you. So I guess that's how the future is going to be, and we've seen that happen with apps, AI apps like Perplexity and many more as well, where they use multiple models. In fact, I've even spoken to one of the team, and what we understood is that they use an OpenAI's model to just understand the context behind the scraped data from internet, and they run it by like specialized models. For example, if it's a math question, they run it by like free model to get to understand much better and provide you a very accurate answer. So I guess that's how the market would evolve, and that's what we believe and we are working on as well. So we enable players across the globe to build specialized models. In order to achieve that is where we encourage people to like contribute specialized data sets. And specialized models itself is much more efficient in terms of how much compute it might consume or how much data it might consume and the time it would take probably to train these models as well. And they of course are naturally less hallucinating because it has very specific data and you're going to ask very specific questions to it, so it's less hallucinating. It has less misrepresentations. You could have much more specified tasks, so the amount of tokens you probably consume and the amount of energy that you consume is much lesser compared to like larger language models as well. So I guess that's how the market is evolving. And there is this famous quote by Andres, right, where he goes on to tell that LLMs are like OS, and SLMs are like the specialized models are like these apps that are built on top of it. And that's what I envision as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Ram. Super insightful. Passing this question over to Gaurav from our tech team. Gaurav, just to kind of reiterate the question, like, what's our company's view on the future of LLMs and SLMs, and where do we see these technologies heading?
I think Ram has predominantly covered most of the things, and I believe in the same view. I think LLMs and SLMs are basically complementary tools to each other. LLMs excel in your complex journal purpose task, but because they're journal purpose and complex, they can be very resource intensive, right? On the other hand, the SLMs are predominantly focused on a specific task, hence they are very, uh, I'll say, very performant, energy efficient, and they're adaptable also. And this will work for sure in future for edge devices for specialized tasks, right? And in my opinion, the future would be hybrid of the LLM SLMs. Like for example, let's say in my case, I worked in Booking Holdings Group, right? And over there, I've seen people using the LLMs now. Uh, companies like for flight and hotel use this in their customer support automation side. So companies like airlines or bank use LLMs to handle like customer queries across multiple topics. LLM powered chatbots can understand like complex questions, they can understand the context, and the response are even better because they understand the context, right? And they seamlessly integrate also with multiple data sources, which basically makes it even more powerful. For instance, it could handle a request to cancel a booking, or if you ask it to suggest more hotels uh, in the location we are standing right now. So all these things could be done by LLMs. But on the other hand, if you talk about what will be the use cases where SLMs will be better, it would be like your device specific applications, like maybe a fitness tracker, right? Where SLM can analyze your workout patterns, it can give you your personalized tips, and even suggest activities which are better for you at this particular moment, right? And for these use cases, it doesn't need to basically train on a big data set, the SLM, right? For this particular use case, it'll be pre-trained, and the small amount of data which is being collected on your own fitness tracker is good enough to make it better over a period of time. And because it works on such a small amount of data and it's a small model, it doesn't even require a huge amount of power, right? And it basically will give you more data privacy and so on and so forth, right? So in future, you will see a combination of both these being used in the industry. Now, each have its own benefit, so people will pick and choose in which case which one to prefer. But for sure, you will see both of them being there uh, in the companies.
Thank you so much for that, Gaurav. Really, really interesting context there. And it's great that we're sharing and we're always in lockstep with these emerging technologies and we're very clear in the direction these are heading. So, really appreciate that. Taking a little bit of a step back and looking at the industry more sort of holistically, really curious about partnerships. The power of partnerships is immense, especially in the Web3 world. And Tarsif, we've got a question here that's coming from the community, which is like essentially asking how do partnerships play a role in advancing like our mission here at ionet, and what do you traditionally look for in some of the collaborators within the Web3 or broader AI ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take that. So obviously, I think partnerships are a key aspect of how we move this whole space forward, right? So if you kind of step back to look at the vision of, where IO and Openledger are building, we're essentially trying to decentralize different parts of the AI tech stack, and we're coming to do it in like different ways, right? So obviously, IO is coming from the perspective of providing distributed, generally available compute that's spread out across the globe and accessible in a permissionless manner, while Openledger is taking on this challenge from sort of permissionless data set and blockchain secured data, which is sort of like the other foundational pillar of AI innovation. So I think in terms of sort of how I look at partnerships and how we push the whole space forward, I think IO specifically is very much focused on sort of that foundational layer of compute, right? But if you're going to talk about how we make the entire AI ecosystem decentralized, there's a ton of other players and really interesting startups and really great developers and teams out there building a variety of different applications and experimenting in a lot of different ways to see what sort of business models, consumer models make a lot of sense, get a lot of traction, and kind of find that virality among consumers, right? So I think in the Web2 world, of course, we've had our Chat GPT moment where everyone's kind of awoken to the power of LLMs and integrating AI into their daily lives and workflows and productivity use cases. But I think we're still working towards having that same aha moment in a more mainstream sense for decentralized AI as well, which I think at the end of the day we will get to by establishing sort of a broader ecosystem of partners who work together to be able to build that vision out forward. So I think everything we do from the IO side is essentially kind of push that forward and build that out to make that vision a reality.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I think you really hit the nail on the head there with some of the ethos that IO has. Ram, over to you for a very similar question. When it comes to partnerships, curious to hear your perspective on what are the attributes, what are the characteristics that you perhaps look for from some of the people that you're considering partnerships with, and is there anything above and beyond what Tarsif said that could be part of your process?
Yeah, so one thing that I don't believe is label partnerships, right? Where people partner for the namesake. Um, I think nothing fruitful comes out of that. In terms of our partnership, like it's been very specific. We've been in the space over the last 6 to 8 months, but we've just started announcing our partnership because we are going testnet soon. And it makes sense for us to start partnering with people wherever that is possible to be used within our tech stack. And if you take a look at Openledger itself as a product or as a company, it's an infrastructure, right? We enable people to build on top of us, and we would want to work with other partners to let the consumers who are building on top of us have necessary, products and functionalities to make it much more easier. And in this case, when we're partnering with IO, it's natural that we need GPUs because we collect data in our platform. We let people collect data, and then that data has to be converted as modeled as an intelligence. And for that to happen, you would need compute to fine tune these models, right? So it's a natural need for us to go ahead and partner with compute companies, and we wanted to have it in a way that we partner with companies which provide as much as decentralization as possible. And there is also cost that comes in as an important factor. And because in Web3, one of the biggest elements that we work on is bootstrapping, right? Um, we want to enable the average Joe to use our platform to build a model that he thinks would be useful for the larger crowd. And in that case, if he has collected the data for him to fine tune a model, you would need to provide compute as cheap as possible and as efficient as possible still as well. So, and we were figuring out partners to work with, and IO came as a natural fit because they provide compute and they provide enterprise grade compute, and they provide it at a much lower cost as well. So that's one of the major reasons why we partnered with them. And so that's what we truly believe. We want to partner with people who can enable to make our platform much more better and enable our users to use these features so that they can build a model on top of us. They could let agents be built on top of us and many more as well. So yes, so that's what we believe in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ram. Really appreciate the context that you've given there, and really what you look for from a lot of these partnerships makes perfect sense. So appreciate you sharing that. Moving on to the next segment, it's more about the data attribution and community benefits. So we've got some questions here from the community, which is asking us, why is data attribution essential, and how can the broader community benefit from it? So, Gaurav, I'm going to sort of put this question to you first. Just to kind of add on to that, we do see a lot of questions from the community about how they can also like actively participate and contribute data. So if you can also share potentially some light in that, as well as telling the audience why data attribution is essential, that would be amazing.
Uh, People who have built model, for them, it'll sound very obvious. But for the average Joe or people who are not in tech or even in tech areas, people who have never created models, they'll not realize that majority of the work in the life cycle of a model creation goes in your sourcing of data, cleaning of data, and then making sure that that transform data in a shape that model can ingest it. That's where the majority of the like I'll say even 70 to 80% of the effort of model creation goes in this phase. It's that important, right? And the performance of the model is as good as the data which is being fed to it. That is the importance of data. And in the cases of the centralized players, what they have done is they have created multiple products which you are already hooked onto, and they get all the data which they require from these places, right? Like Google or Amazon. They have like the Alexas of the world, the Google chats, the Gmails, and all these places where they source data, and they can learn on top of it, and then they can create models which are beneficial for you, right? But when you want a decentralized AI agent or a decentralized AI model, we need data, and we need clean data. We need data which is unbiased. We need to process data, and over there, the attribution becomes very, very important, right? Because who's giving us data? what is the legacy of data, what is the age of data, has it been modified, in which shape or form it has been modified, so on and so forth. There's so many questions around there, right? It becomes important. So how we can actually solve this problem is if we can motivate people to come by themselves and give us this data set in clean form. And for that, I think majority of the crypto projects, what they have started doing is that they have started now giving the clear, you can say, ownership to, or like you say, credibility to people who are coming and giving you this data. And second, what they've started doing is they've started to incentivize you by giving you tokens when you come and provide your like business data to us. I think that's why it's important, and that's how people will come and start giving it to you.
Thank you, Gaurav. And Tausif, perhaps from a broader business perspective, really curious to hear your feedback on this. So, why do you think that data attribution is essential, and what's your perception in terms of how you feel the broader community can benefit from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think data attribution is probably one of the key sort of hurdles to figure out in terms of like broader adoption in the mainstream of AI models, right? I think realistically, when you kind of like talk about, I think all of us being sort of in AI circles and, being engaged in it all day, I think sometimes we kind of get removed from sort of how people who might not have as much exposure to it typically treat AI and deal with the specter of AI coming in to, take their jobs and take advantage of their hard work and, displace them. So I think kind of having a perspective on data attribution and coming up with a sort of model where people feel included in sort of like the success of AI, especially one that's trained off of their work, is I think really, really key to drive mainstream acceptance. And I think sort of like the points that both Gaurav and Ram hit are pretty spot on. But essentially, from a business perspective, I think I'll actually sort of go into a near-term example of something that just happened yesterday. So if you guys saw the news, OpenAI's video model that they've been hyping up for several months now, Sora, got leaked on Hugging Face, essentially by some of the artists who claimed that the model used their artwork and data to get trained, and essentially they sort of they sort of leaked it by as a sort of um, as a as essentially trying to sort of like fight against OpenAI and make sure that they got the right sort of like revenue and attribution from it. So that kind of shows sort of like how people feel about these models being trained on data that's not exactly that they haven't been sort of like paid for. So I think kind of figuring out how this data attribution happens, making sure that people whose data has been used within that model are adequately compensated and recognized, and essentially kind of setting up that infrastructure will be really, really key to kind of drive, broader community acceptance plus actual benefit for the people participating and contributing data to the training of the model as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tarsif. Definitely agree with some of the points there. Ram, also just to kind of wrap up this topic about data attribution, like what's Openledger's stance on it, and like why does it believe it's essential? And obviously, just the kind of add-on to that question is more from the community perspective, right? Like, how do you feel that the community can not only benefit but also potentially like participate and contribute data?
Yeah, of course. So as I had initially told about, right, we enable people to build specialized models on top of us, and these specialized models are very domain specific. And if you need like domain specific data, you don't get that on the internet. And the only probable way that you can actually get that is either businesses contributing these proprietary data, or the end users, the community coming together and contributing this proprietary data, right? Like for example, we have people who are building like a solidity data net on top of us, where they're collecting like solidity data from the Ethereum community. Bunch of Ethereum community devs are coming together and building this. And then there is another IP data net that's being built on top of us where businesses are coming forward and contributing their licensed IP that they own, which can be probably built onto like media models, right? And for all of this to happen, like if you want people to go ahead and contribute data, one of the biggest aspect that is that you need to attribute back to each and everyone's contribution. And the way that to do is actually have a fair attribution, right? And that's what we are working on. We're working on a model which is called like data inf, which is basically on every inference that happens, right? Every time when you infer a model, we figure out the impact, um, the influence the data point provides on that particular model, and we attribute back to each data point provider based on the inference that is there, which truly gives out reward back to the data contributor. And we do it on chain. We have the entire proof of attribution on chain. So right from getting the data, we make sure that the user data is recorded on chain and the user who is providing the data is recorded on chain as well. We track the entire provenance of how the data travels through our system. And then as the model is being inferred, we figure out which data point influences that inference, and then we attribute back accordingly. And I think this is very important if you're building a system where you would want the community to participate, provide data, build models, and build intelligence by themselves. Building a system where this can sustain it on its own, it's very important. If you take like an OpenAI and all that, they make the revenues and they enjoy the benefit of the people's data, but there's nothing that goes back, right? If you take a look at Web 2, even if it was unfair in traditional internet era, there's always a two-way street. You provided a blog and it gets indexed by Google, you get traffic and you get paid. But that's not happening with AI, right? And soon we will all be interfacing with AI. So there should be a platform where if a business or an end user contributes to the platform, contributes to the AI, there's a way for him to get attributed back, and that's what we're working on. Think of this like how like initial YouTube era when no one monetized YouTube and YouTube never brought in monetization. There was junk content over there. There was like junk videos. No one took it seriously, and when YouTube brought in monetization, all the content that you see today are by professionals like YouTubers who turned out to become YouTubers, and businesses who have like proprietary content using YouTube because they know they will be attributed back, they'll be paid back. Very similarly, today open source data market has junk data, right? There is okay, pretty much a bit of a good amount of data that is available, like refined web and all that, but that's very small, right? Most of that is junk data. So once you start monetizing open source data, once you provide capabilities to do that, you would have people taking this very seriously, data contributors becoming a profession, and businesses who have very unique and proprietary data which are useful for the market coming forward and providing data because they would know they would be fairly attributed back. And what Openledger is building is an infrastructure for this to happen. And we would encourage all of the people, all of the community to participate and contribute their data. This could be a business or an end user contributing and working towards building models, which are a contribution of the public and the business that is open and getting benefited for that as well.
Yeah, totally, Ram. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a really really interesting answer. And you mentioned a lot about AI, right? One of the key sort of words that we're seeing flying around now is a lot about AI agents, and that's really where the next topic is that people are asking about. So, Gaurav, I'm going to sort of present this question to you, right? Like we've got a question here from the community just asking about AI agents. So for those of like the community members who are listening in who are unaware, could you just briefly explain what AI agents are? But once you do that, could you unpack a little bit more about potentially how AI agents can effectively be utilized in obviously the technology that we're seeing today, perhaps even at ionet if that's something that we're considering, and what would be the general approach to data management from, or what role would an AI agent play in the sort of role of data management?
Hi. So I think the easiest definition would be that an AI agent is basically an autonomous system that uses an artificial intelligence to perform the tasks or make a decision without the human intervention. These agents could actually be either interacting with your environment, processing data, and taking the actions to achieve like the specific goals. Like we discussed it before, either it could be the hotel use cases where you want to book a flight, cancel a flight, right? Or you want to have cases where models are basically giving you the options of what exercises to be done, what's your heart rate, like what you should do at that particular point in time. All these cases, right? Now there are different kind of models which do that, but your AI agents, when basically what they'll do is they'll interact with your environment. They'll see the data which is available to that particular model at that time, and then they'll take actions and give you either options or execute a task. That's in a nutshell what an AI agent will do in future. Now there are various kind of AI agents depending on what particular model is empowering them. They could be specific like task AI agents, which helps you with legal suggestions. If you have a legal problem, what kind of things you're supposed to do. There could be AI agents which can help you in learning a language. Like there are a lot of people who travel nowadays after COVID, so they are having issues going to different countries and getting adapted to learning a new language. So there are a lot of AI agents which are there now which help people learn language faster. Right now, there are other AI agents which are generic in nature, which can interpret like a complex task and then break down that particular task into smaller tasks and give you directions or execute tasks for you, right? But depending on your specific problem set, people will use specific AI agents and will get the results accordingly, right? I think we discussed this thing very briefly in the beginning, that what kind of AI agents or models which we'll use in future. As we said, like it'll be a combination of both. So the type of AI agents which will be used in future also will be a combination of both, specific tasks and generic both. Both have their own merit.
Thank you for that, Gaurav. And now, like a question a little bit more specifically for Openledger. So, we've got a question here, Ram, which is asking, how does Openledger ensure the quality and accuracy of the data contributed by the community? Are you able to share some light on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, what are the biggest problem? I think, like even Gaurav mentioned it before, right? When people are contributing data, and a very specific domain data or even like generalized intent data, right? The biggest problem with that is quality. How do you ensure that the right quality of data is collected and people don't, bombard your platform with junk information? One aspect how we deal with that is there are two ways I would say. One is more on the technical aspect where we work with eigenlayer on this. We let them run AVS validators on top of us, which basically validates the data that is being contributed. We let all the data nets that are built on top of us to go ahead and create like a validation rule engine. And these rule engine is basically run by eigen validators to validate the data that comes in. And we make sure that privacy is enabled as well. All of these validators are DE-enabled validators. They actually don't know the actual data that is there. It is a platform that goes ahead and validates that. On the second hand is more on the negative incentivizing, because if people are going to contribute data which is not useful and not going to be um, anyway workable for a model, they're not going to be attributed back for them back for that, right? They're not going to be paid for that. So it's a negative incentivizing for them to not actually provide chunk data. So that comes naturally within our ecosystem. And since we are able to bring in attribution, point out to which data point caused this, and if obviously the marketplace shows you that your data point was not useful for model, and it is just not worthy for him to actually, for a person or a business to actually contribute data which is not useful. So these are the two ways that we actually implement ways to make sure that the data that is contributed is quality checked and verified as well.
Thank you for that, Ram. Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And on the topic of data and technology, one of the sort of key questions that I've seen come up a few times is talking about this concept of three layers, right? And the three layers are data contribution, model building, and apps. And really curious from your perspective, Ram, while we have you, um, Could you tell us a little bit more about these three layers when it comes to data and potentially how they can work together to benefit the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, so maybe I can like lighten the fact around like data and like data attribution, right? Which is sort of like the center point of what we do. And like because of attribution, what happens is that we've all spoke about this, there is reward, but also what other two happens is that you're able to have price discovery, right? You're able to let people discover what is the price for the data that they contributed. And number three, you make the AI much more explainable. So you are able to figure out like how a data is influencing a model, and you're able to fine tune your model accordingly as well based on much more clarity of how a data influences a model. So let me kind of tell you like how these three stakeholders get benefited because of that. And as you pointed out, like the first, the data layer where people are contributing data and they're providing to this data net of us. What happens with this particular stakeholders is that we want to make sure that they are having complete provenance of how the data travels through our ecosystem, and that everything is on chain, right? So they will be able to figure out what kind of data they contribute and how is it recorded on chain, when it's fine tuned, and when it's inferred as well. And once it's inferred, they'll be able to know how the data influenced that particular inference, and they'll be able to figure out what is the impact it actually created. They'll be able to see the weightage of their own data point for that particular inference. They'll all be also able to figure out what is the revenue that particular inference yielded, and how much are they going to be benefited out of that. So the data providers now have trust in the platform that the data was not manipulated. It was used within the model, and which model it is, and which inference their data point was impacted for, and what was that impact, and how much they're getting paid because of the impact. All of this is on chain. And then the model providers have clarity based on every inference that is there, that how each data point that was collected was benefiting this model, and which enabled better revenue for them because they were able to provide better inference. So they can decide what kind of data they need to collect, and what kind of rule engine you need to set to collect that data, and how to benefit the data providers as well. So model have better knowledge of how data is influencing their algorithm. App developers who use these models know what kind of data is being used in the inference that they get, so they have the entire provenance. Like today, if you use a black box model like OpenAI's model, you don't know what data is being trained on, and how your data that you give feedback is shared as well, so you don't have any clarity about that. But now app developers, if the model is much more explainable, you know what kind of data it's being trained on, and what influences the inference that you get. So you'll be able to see whether the data was biased, was the inference biased or not, and you would be able to, understand your inference better so that you can use it accordingly. So it just provides a much better, clear inference, and that much better knowledge of what data actually influence this inference as well. So these are the three ways where we benefit the data providers, model creators, and agents or app builders on top of us.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Ram. And Gaurav, likewise, I'm keen to hear your perspective on this. When it comes to the three-layer model, would be really interesting if you could provide like ionet's approach on data contribution, model building, and apps.
I think the first layer, we predominantly right now is a DePIN, right? And now we are going towards in a direction where we will build products where people can contribute data and they can build data and they can deploy apps, right? And that's where these three layers come in. The first one is their data contribution side, right? Which is the most foundation, like which is basically the foundation layer, where the platform will enable individuals and organizations to contribute diverse data sets. I think this is not the first product we'll build. We have the view what we will be building in future, but that's not the first place we'll be starting. I think what Ram is basically doing is he's creating a layer right from day one, focused on a blockchain methodology where he has the whole data provenance already in place, and where people can actually contribute data from different data sources is on blockchain. And if anybody is using that data, uh, like from the model side, they exactly know who was the source of data, and if the data was helpful, how the split of the revenue or like the business side of things should be done. I think that's what he's focusing on. On our side, we are doing the other way around. We have built a DePIN first, and now what we're building is on the upper layer, which is we're giving the infrastructure first. Although the data contribution side is important, but rather than going straight away in a direction where we create a blockchain for people to contribute data as a first step, we are going in a direction where we create a decentralized platform to deploy the models and apps and create the models. We are basically investing in that first. So the first product which we are basically launching is the IO intelligence. We did the analysis of a bunch of AI agents recently, and we realized that there are so many open source strong models available like for free to people, which are not being given to the community. The reason being is, first of all, what is the incentive for anyone to give these models to people? Like, if there's no business being made, why would they ever give? And second is, even if somebody thinks of doing it, um, deploying it on GPUs and giving it for free to people requires a lot of money because GPUs are costly. So we realize that there's a bunch of work which people have done, which the community can benefit. So what we are doing is the first platform. We are doing the other way around. The first platform we are building is the apps layer, the topmost layer, where we will pick up all these popular AI models and agents which are available for free, and we'll deploy it on our powerful GPUs, and we'll give it to the public for free so that they can benefit effective immediately in a very short period of time all the hard work which the community has done in past already. So that's the first layer we're building. This particular product will be launched as soon as, I think, in the next couple of weeks you will see it on the platform. The second layer which we're building is the model building layer. So now what we're creating is we are creating a platform as a part of the IO intelligence in the phase two, where people can bring their own data in the beginning, and they can basically create their models, train the models, fine tune the models, optimize the models. And if they want to deploy it, inference it, we will give a platform for that also. So anytime you create a model, there is a whole building the model piece, but there's a huge amount of engineering which goes, which the machine learning people say ML ops, where you create a pipeline for testing of the models. When the models get retrained, you go through the pipeline to deploy it again. If your model is being used at a very high scale, you have to scale your number of GPUs in the background to deploy the same model on the multiple GPU instances. There's a huge amount of effort which of engineering which goes on that side also. So we will abstract all these issues away from the ML engineers, and we'll create a platform for them where they just have to focus on the model building, and they don't have to like think about these problems. That's a second layer we'll build. And the main thing which we'll do is, if you go to any of the web 2 players which do something similar, they basically charge you money from time t0 when you start to work with them. We'll basically go in a direction where we will enable the community with a certain amount of free resources in beginning, where they can like start to create the model on a particular GPU and train and fine tune it for a limited time for free. And once they're confident that okay, the model is done and they want to deploy it and scale it to multiple users so that people can use it, we will basically give them incentive in terms of tokens if the model is performing well. That's a second layer we built. And the third layer, which we'll go to, is what exactly Openledger is doing eventually in future, where potentially we'll create a blockchain where all the companies, organizations, uh, individuals by themselves can come and can contribute data with a seamless interface, which will be visible to everyone. And the whole pipeline and the provenance part of the data will be visible to everyone, that how, who sourced the data, is the data modified by the time it comes to you? If it has been modified, who has modified it, which shape and form it has been modified in, was there any biases being included in the data? All that visibility will be given to the people, and that will be the third layer which we'll build eventually. So I think Openledger is going bottom up. We believe that for us, DePIN was the first problem, and now we are building this 3-layer model the other way around, giving apps for free first, then the platform to build the models, and then the data contribution layer.
Yeah, totally, Gaurav. And I really appreciate you sharing that context to clarify some of the nuances in terms of what we're building and what Openledger is building. So, guys, first of all, thank you so much for answering those questions. We're coming to the end of the AMA now, and just to wrap it up, we've finalized 3 questions from the community that we're going to ask. I'm going to ask each one of you one specific question that I think could potentially be interesting. The very first question is for Tarsif. So Tarsif, we got a question here that someone's asking, and it says, for Tarsif, what makes a collaboration exciting? What are the things that you look for where you immediately feel this collaboration is likely to be a success story?
Yeah, great question there. I think for me, how I sort of really approach partnerships and collaborations is really trying to understand what a particular partner or collaborator is building and what niche they're really trying to target and what they're sort of like building their killer app around, right? And sort of um, fitting that sort of niche and product within like our internal product roadmap at ionet and sort of like our vision and kind of really understanding where those gaps are kind of filled out and how the potential sum of the parts is greater than the actual sum, right? When you kind of put those pieces together. So I think something like this partnership between IO and Openledger kind of really falls within that wheelhouse. And I think the last question that we sort of were discussing around the 3-layer model and, going into all the different specifications around how data contribution, model building, app building, all of this works and fits together and how each of our individual companies kind of really approaches it was, kind of the proof of concept of that, right? Like obviously with ionet being so focused on the compute and model side, while Openledger being so focused on the data and authenticity and verification side. It really does, when you kind of put those pieces together, like both of those individual pieces are really critical parts of the AI development tech stack, but they're also fairly disparate. So when you kind of put together 2 companies who are building hyper focused on each of those specific pillars, that when put together complement each other really, really well. I think those particular situations kind of show that there's a lot of potential and opportunity for that partnership to really blossom and build something from 0 to 1 and essentially bring something to the community that is a greater vision than what any individual company can accomplish, right? And I think similarly, there's different parts of the decentralized AI stack where similar contributions and partnerships can take place and collaborations can happen. So I think sort of like the entire ecosystem is peppered with a lot of great builders who can essentially sort of like focus on their specific niche. And at the end of the day, it's difficult for any one company to build every aspect of the decentralized AI tech stack. So I think looking at these partnerships and collaborations can really enable us to sort of accomplish that vision a lot quicker and at a lot more speed.
Yeah, totally. Tarsif, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. So super exciting, and thank you so much for sharing that. Gaurav, I've got a similar question for you, but you mentioned some of the things that we're building here at ionet. One of the community members is asking, will there be more chances for the community members to directly and potentially test the use of some of the things that you build, i.e. some AI models on our platform?
And the answer is absolutely yes. So the first thing is, I think I'll post a message soon on X. Um, we basically have done our own research, and we have picked up few popular models, strong models, which are there present in the outside world, which will enable from our platform for people to use. But if you feel there's some model which you feel is not very popular, or maybe we miss the one which we shortlisted, the one which you want, I think you can recommend us that. Uh, on the other side, if there's a model which you yourself have written and you think it's good, the phase 2 of our product of IO Intelligence will basically enable like anyone to have a platform to deploy their own models on our GPUs for a limited period of time and give it to the like community. And if that particular model starts to perform well, obviously we will give them credits of GPUs to keep deploying it on our side. Plus, we'll incentivize those folks to keep developing, keep building with our tokens also. So yes, there will be that time when you can build a model and deploy on our side, and we'll enable you that. But that's phase two. I think that will start, I think, as early as in January. But right now, in next couple of weeks, we will enable the already built model on our platform so that people can start to benefit effective immediately. That's the one we are building first.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Gaurav. Incredibly exciting. And Ram, we got a final question here from the community for yourself to wrap up the AMA. And it's asking, how is Open Ledger revolutionizing the way that people are thinking about data ownership and attribution? And what impact does it think this will have on the broader AI and decentralized technology?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered some of the major points, right? But the overall thesis behind this is that what is decentralization? Decentralization is where we give back power to the people and not, as the name suggests, to be centralized and owned by only a certain group of people. And if AI is going to be a technology which is going to be used within our everyday life, if you're going to depend on that, on how you operate, how you make decisions, you don't want that to be controlled by centralized folks, right? Sure, we have there is governments and all that that is regulated, but still, centralization would lead into some kind of overpower and would lead into some kind of manipulation that's possible. And we've seen that happen with the modern computer era. We've seen that happen with the internet era. And I always believe this, right? Decentralization is a mindset, not a technological problem. Um, the current generation is much more aware of how like data ownership, decentralization, and all that is important because they believe in the democracy. Right? They believe that internet should be democratic, and that was not the case before, right? The previous generation was more on the benefit that they get, the user experience that they get compared to the privacy that is there. So I guess that's where we've evolved, and that's what we want to encourage also to be there, right? There are two aspects to us. One is decentralization and data ownership is very important. Everyone who is going to contribute data have to be attributed back, and we need to have it as a decentralized mechanism so that you can trust the platform, you trust the code, not the people. Number two is using decentralizations to benefit businesses, right? So tomorrow, if business needs to be relevant, they need to contribute to AI, and for them to contribute to AI, they need to have a platform where they can trust and share their data. And today, there is no centralized bodies to actually do that. They would scrap your data and never pay you back. So if we can build a mechanism wherein that businesses can start contributing and get benefited, and they have a way for them to contribute more and more data, which would encourage them to actually run their business, then you've achieved a platform where you can attribute back to the data providers, the true data providers. And the best way to do that is to have a mechanism which is completely trustless, and you could rely on the code, not on the people. So that's exactly what we're building, right? Build these two, have decentralization as a mechanism, as a mindset, not as the big tech enablement. Use tech to give back to the people, as because we are the ones who actually enabled all of this happen, and we need to get paid and attributed back. So yeah, so these are the two major reasons why we are building Openledger, to enable the true owners of data and to also enable businesses who have valuable data to make attribution possible back to them.
Yeah, amazing. No, Ram, thank you so much for that. I think that was incredibly valuable for the community. And guys, for those of you listening in, just to kind of reiterate, like if you did listen in on this AMA, feel free to take a screenshot and post it on the Discord channel for Open Ledger. There should be a link in the thread below. You can win prizes. I think it's the first 50 people. So just kind of reiterating that. But Gaurav, Tasif, and Ram, thank you all for sharing your time today to unpack some of the nuances of the industry, what we're building, and sharing specific questions that the community had about ionet or Openledger. I think it was really, really valuable, and we shared a lot of insights in terms of what we're building, why we're building it, and above all, the impact that we're going to make within this industry. And I'm incredibly excited about the partnership with Openledger, as I'm sure everyone is at ionet. So it's just been fantastic to have you here, Ram. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to collaborating with you even further going forward.
Awesome. Glad to be here, and thank you for the time.
Great. Thanks all.